Can you just tell me, Morgan?
Welcome to your 3 o'clock session. This is building a positive working relationship with parents. I'm going to give us a while for everyone, just a minute or so for everyone to get in the space and get situated before Ms. Bigler starts. All right, it is 3 o'clock. So hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for, as I said a moment ago, building a positive working relationship with parents with Casey Bigler. I will introduce our speaker there in just a moment, but first, a couple of reminders. This session is recorded and will be available on the conference platform about an hour after the session ends. Reminder also that we do want to hear from you in chat. So please do feel free to ask questions or comment in the chat box on the conference platform. So on that Pathable website, we recommend using that because the chat feature will record the chats for the session that we can keep there on the Pathable website as opposed to the Zoom platform. Please also remember to keep yourself muted unless Ms. Bigler asks you otherwise. And without further ado, I'm happy to and excited to introduce to you Ms. Casey Bigler. She is the Unit Director for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. In this position, she oversees several programs, including infant toddler, special healthcare needs, maternal child health, home visiting, and family planning programs. She works closely with the section director and consultants to ensure quality collaborative services for children and families that they occur across the state. She originally joined the special healthcare needs team in December of 2013 as the program manager, where she was primarily responsible for overseeing program activities, family and youth engagement opportunities within the Bureau of Family Health, and a variety of other projects and activities. Casey previously worked for a nonprofit organization as a parent information specialist and the parent-to-parent coordinator. In this role, she worked closely with the special healthcare needs program as the liaison for the organization. She has over 26 years experience working with families who have children with special needs. And Casey is a proud mother and grandmother of children with disabilities, so she understands firsthand how important the supports for children and families can be. And without further ado, Ms. Casey Bigler, take it away.
Thank you, Morgan. I hope everybody has had a wonderful conference so far. And I want to thank you for joining this session. It's really important, and anybody that has ever worked with me knows that I'm very passionate about the relationship building that we have with parents. Being a parent, I know how important it is for me to have built relationships with all of the people that have worked with my children over the years. And I know how important it is from the provider perspective. One part of my intro that Morgan wasn't able to share that she didn't have was that I also worked in the early childhood field for a local school district and did home visiting as part of that for 16 years. So I kind of know what that looks like and how that goes about. So welcome, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And we're going to just get started with, let me see if I can get my slides to work. Well, there we go. It takes 3 tries and that wants to go. So we're going to start with just an overview today. First of all, I want to just touch on the KDHE home visiting programs because we do have a variety of several different programs. And I know if you attended Carrie Aiken's session earlier, you learned a lot about this. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I just want to kind of go over the different home visiting programs that are available. I also really want to focus on the importance of partnership, what that looks like between you as a provider and families, and that there's challenges sometimes to quality partnership and what those can look like and how we can overcome those. We want to focus today on principles to building positive partnerships. I call this the HEART principles. Pretty easy steps, but it really does make a difference when you're thinking about that. And then we're going to talk about the benefits to partnership, not only for the families, but also for you. Everyone needs to have some benefits to have buy-in, and there are benefits to all parties. And then we'll just do a quick summary and resources as well. And I'm pretty informal. If somebody has a question as we go throughout, please feel free to ask. I have only a single monitor, so I'm not able to get the chat bar up on the side. So Morgan, if you would kind of monitor that for me and stop me if need be, I'd sure appreciate it. But feel free if anybody has questions as we go along. I'm happy to answer those. So let's start with the home visiting program. So KDHE, as I'm sure you have heard earlier, supports 3 types of home visiting models. So the very first one is what we call our MCH, Maternal Child Health Home Visiting Model, which is really nice because that model is for everybody, right? We want to get that across the state. We want to touch every mom that delivers a baby. But we know that it's limited. There's only 2 visits, one postpartum or one before they deliver and one after they deliver. So we know that there's not a lot of information in 2 visits that can be shared with families, but we know what is shared is very effective. Then our next set of home visiting, and so I kind of envision this as a pyramid personally. The next set that we envision or have is the evidence-based or promising practice home visiting models. These are things like Parents as Teachers, Early Head Start, Healthy Families, TIES program. All of those are either evidence-based or promising practices, and those are more intensive. Those home visiting models, can have several different appointments per month. They can go on up until the child is 5 in some of them. It just depends on the individual model that is being used and how frequently they can have those visits. And then our last tier at the very top of the pyramid is the infant toddler tiny K programs. These programs are really for those children who have been identified or suspected of having a developmental delay and need extra services to really help them develop those milestones, those typical milestones that kids can't go through. So that is kind of the way that our home visiting services go. What I think is really important to know is those home visiting services can flow back and forth between each other. So a really good example is if you have the maternal child and health home visiting model, and you've had your 2 visits and you're a mom and you really want more support for home visiting, you could be referred to one of those evidence-based models in your area and actually receive those services. If you're in an evidence-based home model, but your child is showing some developmental milestone delays, you can be referred to the infant toddler, and you can have both. You can have both services at the same time. So it's really important to remember that those ebb and flow back and forth. If they're in an infant toddler program, but now they've met their developmental milestones and they're being dismissed from that, they can go back into the evidence-based home visiting practice. So know that it doesn't take away clients from you by having them in other models. So when we talk about the importance of partnership, I'm just going to pull all these up on screen. We're going to start with healthy and happy children. So there's a lot of reasons why we want to partner with families. The first one is really because we want to provide quality education to the parents to help them support their child's growth and development. That's so important. The healthier kids are now, the better off we are in 20 years with our new generation because we've got healthy, productive adults at that point. And you guys are critical to that development. I know that each of you entered the profession, not because you wanted to get rich, but because you wanted to help children and families. And that's why we do what we do. So the best thing to do is to build that trusting, supportive relationship with families, because once you have that, families feel equipped to really provide the services that their child needs. And then in return, we're developing healthy and happy and productive children, right? Also, when you go into a parent's environment and you're able to provide some education, because, parenting doesn't come with a handbook. We don't know what we don't know. And especially new parents for the first time, but even parents who have had several kids, every child is different, right? We learn from every child. So it's really nice to have somebody there that has some knowledge in child development and can help us understand what safe sleep is, breastfeeding techniques, just, what are safe ways to transport your child? What are safety precautions to have in the home? How to interact with your child so that they can really learn and grow at their developmental pace. The more that parents are educated, the calmer and more productive the environment for the child and parent. And the more that you strengthen that, you have a really good parent home visitor interaction. And it's really important to build that bond. Open communication is essential to this. Really talking to families, really listening to families. And we're going to talk a lot about that here later on in the webinar. But it's really important to keep that open communication with families, making sure that you are really listening to what they say and that you're also being open and honest. When you have open communication, you are building support and building a rapport with the families. And that can really help you, because later on, there could be things that, because you've got this really good communication and the trusted relationship going on, that families will share with you some important things that maybe would help you better be able to provide services for the family and the child. Support. The families love the support that they get from you if they're questioning some of their child development skills and trying to figure out, how can I stimulate my child with speech or with walking or whatever. The support that they get from you and the suggestions and the ideas, they really appreciate. But at the same time, they can also support you in your job. If there's something that you need to have happen because of, say, a policy change or something like that, a lot of times families are the best source of support for what you're doing to get those things to happen. It's really important that we also really take the time with parents and really give them what they need and be flexible on our schedule. And the more that you do that, the more that they appreciate that, and will also be flexible in return. There's a lot of appreciation that's shown between parents and home visitors. I think nothing keeps us grounded and keeps us going in what we do other than the appreciation from families. I mean, they really do see the difference that you're making in their lives and their children's lives. And so the more that you have that two-way partnership, the more appreciation you're going to see in that, which again leads to job satisfaction. Nobody wants to do a job that they're not happy and satisfied in. And home visiting, I think, is one of the best arenas to really get great job satisfaction. So, as with any kind of partnership, there's always some kind of challenge, right? And sometimes we don't think about the challenges that we have, but maybe the families do. And so it's really important to try to keep an open mind and think about what the challenges could be with each family that you work with. So one thing that I want to point out is things like terminology. We all use so many different kinds of terminology, and that can be really difficult. And if a family doesn't understand the terminology you're using, then they're not sure what that means and where they need to go next. We also use a lot of acronyms as well. So a really good example of that would be in Part C or Tiny K. They use IFSPs. Well, if you're not in the world of Tiny K or early childhood, you might not know that that stands for Individual Family Service Plan and what an Individual Family Service Plan is. That's when we have to break those barriers down and we have to really explain what those acronyms are. And I know here at KDHE, like I'm probably the top of the pile for using acronyms and the worst in the world for it, but it's really important that we think about what we're saying to families. When we're talking about terminology, I want to give you a really good example. Let's say, in language barriers, let's say that I said to you, enfermo. Most of you would know that that means sick in Spanish, right? Or some of you would know that. Not everybody. But if I said attack, would you know what that meant? Would you have any idea? A lot of you probably don't. You don't know that that stands for seizure. So it's really important to think about what these families know for terminology and understand, because even terminology that's in English and they speak English, they might not understand. A really good example of that is if we say otis medium. How many of you probably know what that means? Probably a lot of you because of the field you're in, but a lot of families aren't going to know that means earache, right? Use layman terms because that's what's going to make sense to them. Also, there's cultural differences. So, you know, the language, when I want to step back on language for just a minute, when you think about language barriers, there's even different dialects for the same language. And so you have to be really careful about the language barriers and making sure that you're addressing the family in the way that best suits them, and not using a child to interpret. If a child is there to do the interpreting, things always get kind of lost in the translation. I would really recommend that you speak with your supervisor to find out how you can overcome that barrier. Each agency kind of has a policy that they follow on that kind of thing. So make sure you're up to date with your agency's policy on that. Cultural differences. This is one that I think is so easy to overlook. Someone speaks English just like you do, and you feel like you're on the same page, and you really understand, except you don't stop and think sometimes about those cultural differences. In some cultures, kids are taught to not make eye contact, right? That shows respect for their elders. In America, we think when we're talking to children, they should look at us, and that's a different way. So you have to think about, what does that mean in a different culture? Some cultures, they stand very close to you. And when I do this presentation in person, I will walk up to somebody and I will get very close to somebody sitting in the chair, and you just see them, like you start seeing their tension build, and other people are kind of looking at like, what is she doing, right? And then when I turn to that person and say, I just made you uncomfortable because I invaded your space, you get this, yes, get away, and that's very normal. And that's really what we want, is to be respectful of those barriers and think about the cultures. But in some cultures, especially the Asian community, they get very close to you many times in some of those cultures. That's just what they're used to. And that's how they communicate. You also need to think about, like in some of the Native American cultures, who is the decision maker of the family? The decision maker might not always be mom or dad. So if you're there and you're talking to mom about safe sleep, and mom is not the decision maker of the family, because a lot of times it's the paternal grandmother who is the decision maker for some of the Native American cultures. If that paternal grandmother is not there, and she says, you put the baby to sleep on their tummy, that's what mom's going to do. So you have to educate the maternal grandmother to understand that. So you have to really think about, who are the decision makers in the family that help control some of that family dynamic. It might be very different than what you're used to. Also, past negative experiences. We all have that. Parents have that. We have that. And it's really important that we remember that what we've experienced might not be what they're experiencing, and it won't be exactly what they're experiencing. And everybody handles things a little bit differently. So it's really being open-minded and understanding that they're not in the same place you are, and letting them, being there to support them, but not dictate to them what they need to do. I think sometimes that can be really hard. And even if you have two families that have a similar type of experience, again, they still are going to be different, and you have to let each family handle it in their own way. I can give really an example of when I was doing home visiting, and one of the families wanted to try some new therapy for their child. And I had done some research on the therapy, and it hadn't been a positive light. Like, it really didn't show any effectiveness. And I remember thinking, oh, this is just too invasive for this child. But I had to step back because, the parents had to do what they thought was right for their child, and they know their child best, right? They had to try everything that they wanted to try. And sometimes that can be hard for us to do. We also have to remember, we sometimes have past negative experiences that we bring to the table. And sometimes we have to really work hard to make sure our past negative experiences aren't carried over into the families that we work with. Active listening. This is probably my very favorite thing to talk about because it's so important. And when I say active listening, I don't mean just listening with your ears. I mean listening with your whole body. Active listening is making sure that you are looking at eye contact, you're looking at the body and how they relay things. You're listening to the tone of voice. Active listening means you're evaluating everything going on. And you're really paying attention to not only what is said, but what isn't said, okay? And sometimes that can be a really big challenge, especially when a lot of us are doing remote visits right now. I'm one of those people that I like in person because you really can read that body language and it gives you a lot of clues. But we're learning to do that remotely, right? And that's exciting, but it does make for a little bit more of a challenge. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but there are some activities that I would do with this when it was active listening, when we give these presentations in person. And it's really fun because we break up into groups of 3 and we have one person be the talker, and they'll talk about like their last vacation or their last whatever they want to talk about. And then we have somebody that's the recorder who's taking the notes. And then we have somebody that is the listener. And invariably, the listener will give their own opinion or add things to the conversation that really isn't part of it. So we're going to talk more about that, but the tracker will then keep track of all of the times that the active listener is not truly listening actively. And it's really amazing to people to realize, oh, I didn't listen actively. I got involved and we started having a big conversation without me paying attention to what they were thinking. I was giving my opinion. So it's really important to do. The other thing that I want to mention is administrative as well too. Sometimes administrative, and especially in the time of COVID right now, can be kind of a little bit more difficult because sometimes there's policies put in place by your home visiting entity or whoever that can be a barrier for families, because some families right now in COVID, I think probably the most common one is families don't necessarily want people to come into their home because they don't want their child exposed, to the possible COVID, to anybody that could possibly be bringing that in. And so they want virtual visits, but then there's some entities that really, their policy says you have to do home visits. That can be a conflict. And so that's when you can let the family know what the policy is, and then they can go back and help you advocate for maybe making some modifications to those policies with your administration. So I think those are some things to really remember. Excuse me. So the importance of partnership. Oh, I went the wrong way. So we're going to start talking about, I'm going too fast here, about what we call the heart principles. And again, they're very easy. They're very honest, but they're very, very important. As you can see here, the heart principles are honesty, empathy, active listening, being receptive to new ideas, and transparent. These are all things that when you just think about heart and you think of what they stand for, if you're following all of these, you're going to build an open and honest dialogue with families and have a really good partnership. So let's just start with the H. We're going to start with honesty. Honesty is defined as fairness and straightforwardness of conduct. It's really important that parents can sense when someone's not being honest. So it's really important for you to be honest, just like you can. You can sense if somebody's being dishonest to you. That's just a sense that, a natural sense to human beings that we have. It only takes one dishonest act to destroy the partnership, right? If you're dishonest once and people catch you, like you've just hurt a lot of the work that you've put together. It's work to build partnerships. It's work to build trust. And if you do something that's dishonest, you have already lost that. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer. Nobody expects you to be perfect and know everything. And if you are perfect and you know everything, I'd really like to meet you. But I also would like to say that parents don't expect you to be perfect and they don't expect you to know everything. And honestly, if you did, it's a little intimidating for them. So they actually feel more comfortable at times when you say, I'm not sure about that, but let me go find out and get back to them. Make sure though, you do find out and you do get back to them, because again, if you don't do that, you've just broken that trust. So it's really important to let them know that you will find out, you do care, and then you'll know that answer for the next time. The E stands for empathy, the act of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of another, of either the past or present, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experiences fully communicated in an objective, implicit manner. Empathy is something that's very hard sometimes to have, depending on what the circumstances are. Some people, it just kind of comes out of more. I think with home visitors, empathy is one of those key things that it's just a key characteristic that many home visitors have. But it's really important to remember that We don't know what they have been through. We've not traveled the exact same path. And we need to try to be open-minded to what they're going through and how they're handling it. They might not be handling it in the way that you would handle it or the way that you think others should, but it's their way. And we have to understand that and be there to support. This is when it's really important to consider the social determinants of health and how they might play into the family reaction and comfort level. Okay. It can be hard at times to remember the family's experience from one another, and their past and current situations might be very different from yours or in other families that have similar circumstances. The stress on parents to meet the child's needs can sometimes be overwhelming due to circumstances beyond their control. So be empathetic to what they are experiencing. I think COVID has taught us how important empathy really is and how we really need to be there to support families. So active listening. Again, with active listening, it's really important to listen to everything that's being said, right? Not only hear the words, follow the body language, look at the eye contact. Is the person leaning back? Or are they sitting forward? Because if they're leaning back, they're not as engaged. If they're sitting forward, they're engaged. Are they looking away from you because they're uncomfortable? Or are they making eye contact and really taking in your words? How are they responding to what you said? A really good example, I think, of active listening, when you think about it, is if you have a parent that comes in or you come to their house and they say, I just went to the doctor. I took Tommy to the doctor, and the doctor is very concerned about Tommy's weight. He's not gaining enough weight. We talked about nutrition before, but the doctor was questioning me on his nutrition. They're wanting to run some tests. They're very concerned about his weight gain. The parent could have relayed that in more of an aggressive tone of voice. The parent could be more leaning forward and more, aggressive in body language. And those kinds of things sometimes can make us go, whoa, like that parent is blaming me because I didn't do enough when we talked. I think it's really important to step back and realize this parent could be extremely stressed. This parent could be feeling guilty because the doctor was questioning her on what the nutrition looked like for her child, and she's feeling like that she was being judged possibly by the provider. She's stressed about, what do I do now to help him gain weight? What's going to happen and what's my outcome for my child? So you have to stop and think about where that parent is at in that moment and what that parent is feeling, and know that it's not an attack against you. Sometimes it feels like that, and you as a provider want to back up. Don't do that. Know that it's not an attack against you, because you're reading that person's body language. You're reading their tone of voice. You're listening to all those different components. This is when you use the non-committal responses or open-ended questions or reflecting back. So now let's take a minute to talk about all of those. The non-committal responses are really those, tell me more. Oh, what is that like? Give me more information. Just really, shaking your head, even giving the non-committal responses non-verbally by shaking your head or, really showing your engagement can really be very beneficial. I'm so sorry. Okay. Somebody's decided they really need to get a hold of me bad with every phone. Then the other one is the open-ended questions. If you ask open-ended questions, tell me more about that situation, or what do you think would be the best way to handle that? Or what did you say when they said that to you? Really asking those questions, because you don't want to give the answers. You don't want to tell them what they need to do. It's got to be their decision, and you're helping them problem solve by using those open-ended questions. The other thing you really want to do is reflect back. They've stated different things and you've heard different things, and they've come up maybe with their solutions or what they want to do for next steps, or maybe they just wanted you to be a sounding board. But reflect back. I heard you say, or you said you were going to do this next. Like, follow up with what they said to make sure, number one, your understanding is very clear. Number two, that they were really able to figure out what it was that they needed to work out. And sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes if you don't reflect back, you've misunderstood something. You can't help them with the next step in their child development process if you didn't totally understand. And by reflecting back, that gives them that opportunity to say, well, I said it that way, but here's what I really meant. And they can clarify at that point. So it's really nice to be able to do that. And that way you can get back what you need from them to be able to set up a better plan moving forward. So being receptive to new ideas means being open to new ideas the family may express. Remember, there's a lot of ways to do things and still come out with the same results. So know that families, like I had said with that parent before, they tried that other therapy and I was just like, oh, but you know, they had to go through that and they had to try it. They finally decided that it didn't work for them like they thought it was. It wasn't the miracle thing that they thought it was going to be. But you know what? They did something that they felt was important to try for their child. And that's great. So be receptive to those because the ideas you might present might not be the ones that they jump on to begin with. And that's okay. Let them have that time to try to process what they want to do. And really make sure to not be judgmental. I think that that's so hard sometimes to make sure that we're not passing judgment or not making the family feel like we're passing judgment. Okay, and transparent is the final one. That's the T in heart. Transparent is defined as free from pretense or deceit, readily understood, characterized by visibility or accessibility of information, especially concerning business practices. So transparent goes back with all of these others. The more that you're open and honest and are transparent with families, the more that you're going to build that trust and you're going to have that open partnership. Again, this can be so critical. If there is a lot of social determinants of health going on with a family, there's a lot of different dynamics and you're trying to help the family weed through things. If you're transparent with them, you're going to have a better opportunity for them to be transparent for you. And the more information and the more knowledge you have, the better you can set up a plan to help them. Whether that's resources, whether that's some parenting skills, whatever it may be, transparency really makes a difference. And I believe that here at the level of KDHE as well. I believe we need to be very transparent in what we're doing. And I think a lot of you have found that that's, really becoming the case here at KDHE, is to make sure when you're talking about home visiting, whether it's evidence-based, whether it's infant toddler, or whether it's the MCH, we really want to be very transparent with what we're doing so that we can make sure that we're having a good partnership with all of you moving forward. And I keep wanting to go to the wrong direction. I apologize for that. So here's some just quick tips for meeting with parents. Really try to schedule your home visiting times that are convenient for families. Families need flexibility, and especially during this time, they really are appreciating that a lot. So try to be as flexible as you can. And that way, when you need the family to be flexible with you, they will. That makes a big difference. Make sure that when you go for your home visits, you have your key tasks and discussion points ready. Make sure that if you want to cover safe sleep on that appointment, you really make sure that that's one of your top priorities. It's really important to ask the families, what do you want to talk about? But if there's something really important that you feel like you need to make a point of, make sure that you have that prepared in your mind beforehand and you have any resources that maybe you wanted to leave with you then. Encourage parents to note their questions, concerns, comments, anything to be discussed during the next home visit. It's really good to ask before you leave. Ask when you first get there, is there, specific things that you want to cover today? And before you leave, is there anything that you'd really like to have more information on next time I come? That really helps, again, building that dialogue and opening up that partnership. Use the HEART principles. Believe it or not, they really do work. And then, of course, at the end of the home visit, summarize what was talked about to make sure that there's mutual understanding. So many times we think we've understood, only to find out we really didn't. So it's really important to do. And then follow up with any referrals, resources, or written information that you've promised. Make sure you follow up in a timely manner so that they know that you are invested in them and their family. So let's talk about the benefits for you, benefits for partnership. That's so important. It's easier to assist parents in the care of their child if you have that partnership. They're going to listen to you, they're going to be responsive, and it's going to feel really good because you're really able to make sure that that child is developing the best possible. You get facts when you need them. If there's something going on with the family, let's say that one of the parents lost their job and they're really stressed about money and they're needing, maybe needing some information about food banks. If you know that, you can give those resources and that guidance where it's needed and not offend because you've built that rapport with them. Support for families for policy changes that may be needed, like we talked about earlier. That can be really, really helpful. Appreciation. It's always nice to have the warm and fuzzy appreciation from families and from kiddos that you've helped, and to know there's nothing like seeing them years later and seeing how they've grown up to be productive and healthy adults. I've just dated myself by saying that, but it really is very heartwarming. Again, we want healthy children and families, and by starting with the families, the parents, and helping them be the best parents that they can be to the children, we've just improved our society and improved our long-term outcome. And we've eliminated or decreased, I shouldn't say eliminated, but we would be able to decrease things like child abuse and neglect, juvenile justice needs later, things like that by really providing support now to families. You will have a greater job satisfaction. You'll be much happier in what you do, and you'll be making a difference in a child's life, which is so, so very important. Now, I would like to take a minute and have everybody in the chat put, what is the benefit for you? Like, what do you get the most? What do you feel the most proud of about being a home visitor? So I'm going to pause right there for a minute so you can all type into the chat. Please share.
This is just a reminder that if you are going to type in the chat, to use the Pathable platform.
And don't be afraid, speak up. Or if you want to just speak up without typing it into the chat, feel free to do that too. But I want you to,
we have a building relationships with families was shared in the chat.
Good. Anything else? So my next thing that I want to mention to you all,
Casey, I'm sorry, there's a lot happening in the chat. I don't think that you
okay.
will open. Would you like me to read some?
Yes, please. I don't see anything. So,
there's a lot. Yeah. So we have building relationships with families, getting to know families and watching the parents and their children grow. Karen said, I feel the total relationship can be built and the enjoyment to see the children meet their developmental stages. Shelley said, making a difference. Michelle said, the reward of helping families in need and watching them grow and succeed. Stephanie said, helping families in their environment. Leslie said, supporting families and giving them feedback no matter what. That's awesome. Alexa, being able to build the success and development of not just the child, but the parents too. And Paula said, helping parents realize their potential and educating their children. Hillary said, helping a family realize that they can help their child with a visual impairment. Angel said, I get to empower parents. You guys are awesome.
I love it. Thank you. And I agree. Like, there's nothing like helping a family and seeing a child grow. Like, that is the most fulfilling of everything that we do. Okay, so before we go any further, I also want to challenge all of you too to just take a moment and think about your last home visit. Because we're not able to do this in person and to do some of these activities, I'm going to take you back just a little bit to think about what we talked about with active listening. And I want you to think about that last home visit that you did. And when you did that last home visit, think back. What was the parents' body language like? Were you reading their body language? Did it tell you something different than their words told you? Were you able to interpret what they were thinking or saying based on their body language? And did you use non-committal responses? And if so, how did that work? Did that work well? Did you use open-ended questions or reflect back? I'm going to challenge all of you as you do your next home visit, use some of those techniques and just really evaluate how much better your home visit went because you used some of those techniques and you did less talking and more listening. And I'm a talker, so believe me, I know how hard that can be. Just ask anybody that works with me. But it's so important to do when you're working with families. And they really appreciate having that opportunity to share, like that you value their opinion, you value what they have to say. That is so very, very important. Okay. So benefits to positive partnership to the child and family. So the parents have more peace of mind. They have a better understanding of child development. When we become parents, unless we've taken this in college, we just do not necessarily have the already built in, this is how you raise a child, right? That is something we learn through trial and error. And to have somebody there that understands child development and be able to guide us, that we can ask questions to and know we're going to get correct answers, not answers from some website on, the internet that maybe is just whatever, an opinion, but somebody who truly has some experience and knowledge. That is so important. You're also going to get consistency of care for the child because whatever the parent learns, they're going to share with their daycare provider. They're going to share with their parents. They're going to share with their friends and relatives that interact with that child. So the child is getting consistency of care, which gives that child a well-rounded education in life. You're going to get happier children because they have the consistency, they have the understanding, they know where the limits are. That is so important. There's nothing like a child's laughter. And so that is really, really important. Healthier children, both mentally and physically. You can't separate physical from mental. They go together. If a child is struggling with any kind of mental issues, it's going to affect them physically and vice versa. You can't be physically healthy and mentally not, or mentally sound and not physically. They both overlap. And so I think when we talk about this, it's so important to remember both parts. And when we do, we've got the ASQ that we have been promoting a lot, the Ages and Stages questionnaire, and we have them for both the physical and the mental. So it really, it's all encompassing, and that is so important to remember. Children become active learners. So we want them to learn, and they learn how to communicate better when we're modeling that behavior. So when you're on a home visit and you're talking to mom and dad, children are observing that, and they're also learning how to be active listeners and active learners. An active family home visitor partnership is so important. It's important to you and it's important to them because now you've got that trusted relationship. So some key points to kind of take away: identify and correct communication, cultural, and administrative barriers to help promote positive partnership. Use the HEART principles to develop partnerships. That's honesty, empathy, active listening, receptive to new ideas, and transparent. And no, there's no test after this. And practice and use active listening skills. Establish your positive partnership benefits everyone, including you. So remember, everybody needs a buy-in, and this gives you a buy-in along with the families. I do want to mention the 1-800-CHILDREN helpline. I know you guys are going to be hearing more about that, but this is a really good resource to give to families, but it's also a really good resource for you. And if there are resources in your area that are not on this, I really encourage you. Reach out to the 1-800-CHILDREN and tell them these resources need to be on here. Whether it's mental health facilities, it's doctor's offices, whatever it may be, if it's a resource for children and to help them grow and develop, ask them to please put that on there. And then I also wanted to just briefly mention that we really believe in the interaction with families a lot. Families are why we do what we do. And if we don't engage families and include families to make sure that we're doing the things in the right way, we're never going to get it right. We never should make policy changes or programmatic changes without first finding out how it's going to affect the family. And the best way to do that is to ask them. So we do have a family advisory council. We have consumer advisory councils here at KDHE that really are just to find out what kinds of things need to be changed. What does the Bureau of Family Health need to do to make all of our programs, home visiting, but everything else too, strong and available and accessible to families? Because sometimes there can be a lot of different roadblocks that we're maybe not aware of, and families can tell us that and help us overcome those. So there's a strong focus on provisions of availability, quality, timely service to families, patient family-centered services, and family empowerment and partnership and collaboration, which is what we just talked about today. So here's just a couple of resources that I listed really quick. We are changing our website, so I wasn't going to list all the different things on there. However, in December, when the website is completely done, hopefully it will be much more easy to navigate. But go to the Bureau of Family Health at this link, and please look at all the different programs, all the home visiting programs, but all of the other programs that overlap. You will find just within our unit, we have all of the MCH programs, the maternal child and health programs. We have the teen pregnancy programs or the pregnancy programs. We have the family planning programs. We have special healthcare needs. We have the infant toddler program, and we link with all of the others like WIC and childcare licensing and all of the screening and surveillance programs. So please go in and check out that website to see, what would be helpful resources for you, because there's a lot of things in there. Also, that if you've never seen the What to Do When Your Child Gets Sick, it's really a very friendly book to help families understand, lots of pictures and that type of thing. So if you're working with any kind of literacy things that it's hard to relate for families, this is a really good book to sometimes help them if their child is ill.
And Casey, I'm sorry, I was going to say, will you please show your contact information since that time? This is perfect.
Are we at time? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to go a minute over. I was trying to watch.
No, it's okay. We were trying to flag you. No worries. This is a lot of good information. Thank you so much.
Well, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you all enjoy the conference. If there's questions, I had hoped to leave time for questions, but feel free to reach out and I would be happy to respond. Thank you all.
I'm sorry about that, Casey. I meant to give you more of a warning. I realized you could see the chat, and then I don't have your personal cell. So then I messaged Carrie to see if she could message you. It was I apologize. That should have been.
No, that's okay. Heather Smith has been calling me like over and over again, different ways. So,
okay. Well, thank you. That was great, Casey. That was really great.
Well, let me know if there's any questions that pop up in the chat that I need to respond to. And Thank you for being there to help. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm going to stop sharing.
See you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.